What was the mission, and have we really accomplished it?
There's one overwhelming reason why this was the right thing to do, and that is to deter the use of chemical weapons, not just by the Assad regime, but around the world. And I think one of the most distressing things about the events of the last few years has been the growth, the contemptuous growth in the use of chemical weapons in the Syrian theatre of conflict. And you can imagine that people around the world are looking now and saying, well, finally, someone stood up against that. And the world said enough to the use of such weapons. It's one of the great achievements of the modern world that we've banned chemical weapons. 100 years, virtually, that prohibition has been there, and now the UK, France, America have stepped forward to vindicate that.
But it's also clear that because we had to warn the Russians in advance of what we were doing, so we didn't kill lots of Russians and start World War III, they will have told Assad he has moved stuff out. Do you think he still has weapons capability of that nature?
I can't answer that question. Clearly, the strikes were successful on 3 important sites, but the overwhelming purpose, the mission was to send a message that after years now in which we've seen a series of chemical weapons strikes, 4 of them, by the way, authenticated by the OPCW Joint Investigative Mechanism, dozens of other site attacks of which we have testimony. Finally, the world has said enough is enough. And I think it's important to understand the limits of what we're trying to do.
This is not trying to end the war.
That's right, Andrew. And I think that this is not going to, we must be honest, this is not going to turn the tide of the conflict in Syria. One can hope that it encourages the Russians to get Assad to the negotiating table in Geneva, to get a political process properly going. But that is, as it were, an extra. The primary purpose is to say no to the use of barbaric chemical weapons.
And I want to come directly back to that. But before we do, I guess the question on a lot of people's lips today is that it now? Because President Trump has talked about being locked and loaded. Are we locked and loaded if Assad uses chemical weapons in a week's time or a month's time or 3 months' time? Will we do the same thing again? Is this the beginning of a process or is it the end of something?
Well, we must hope that it is a deterrent. Obviously, that's of course. And I believe it's been a successful mission. I believe it's a timely, appropriate and commensurate mission. We can't tell.
But if in 3 weeks we get a chemical attack,
we can't tell how the Assad regime will respond. I believe it was the right response to what happened in Duma. The evidence was overwhelming, as your correspondent, as people were discussing just now on your show,
Sunday Times, yeah.
On the Sunday Times. The smell of chlorine, the sight of that regime helicopter in the air. No one else has helicopters. No one else would be capable of dropping a barrel bomb of chlorine in that way. The evidence was absolutely overwhelming. It was timely. It was proportionate. And to get to the legal question, it will, I believe, if we can, if it acts
there is
as
a genuine debate about this, isn't there?
If it acts as a deterrent, which I hope it will, it can alleviate further humanitarian suffering.